Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the SaaS Sessions podcast. Today we have Puneet Lamba on the show with us. Puneet is a dear friend since a long time and also the CEO and co-founder of Aspiro. So Aspiro is a product that helps your sales managers prepare your reps for selling to technical buyers with interactive situational role plays and playbooks. Or in basic, it will help you create simulated environments for your reps so that they can practice pitching to in the simulated environment before they go on the field, right? So that helps them get better at what they do. So hey Puneet, such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, hi Sunil. Pleasure is all mine. Super excited
Great.
to be here.
Nice.
Yeah,
So I'm excited as well to have look forward to our conversation. So I know we're going to be talking about like the same pain point that we talked about, right? People don't know or people know like how to do, let's say, calls like discovery calls for examples, but they are not often perfect at it, and there is a lot of leakage that happens in the funnel because of not running your basic discovery calls very tight or very formatted way, right? So I think Aspiro or products like this are better suited to for sales managers so that they can help your reps practice better. So would love to we'll have a discussion on what's the pain point and like how do you generally solve it, and what is the pain point exactly and why you should solve it, right? And what kind of impact it makes if you solve it and if you don't solve it as well. So, but before that, before we jump into that, like I gave a very short 1-2 line intro about you. Would love to know more from your side, a little more about you and how's your journey been into the SaaS ecosystem.
sure. So I am actually an engineer by training. I have nothing to do with the SaaS or GTM out of all the things. I started my career working in investment banking, and I was always kind of super specializing in healthcare. Spent almost a decade doing that, and Spyro is my second startup. My first startup was, in the wellness tech space. I was essentially doing a lot of partnerships with, brands like Uber and RideBite and whatnot. That startup did not really fly after having doing that for 3 years, but I actually started engaging with a lot of B2B players, which
Mm-hmm.
ultimately led me to, some consultative roles with them. So typically, what these consulting engagements would look like is they would, invite me in and ask me to kind of, let's say, improve one or two key metrics, let's say for their biz dev team and so on, right?
Right.
And having done this for about 3, 4 companies, one of them was a publicly listed company, one was a startup, and one was kind of like a bank. Everywhere this theme was repeatedly coming up that their teams, whether it's business development, sales, or customer success, there's an articulation issue, right?
Mm.
So the management is pretty sorted. They have their eyes on the right side of things their team should focus on. The teammates are also smart, but probably
Right.
they are sometimes even pretty well enabled as well. But it's just that the communication between the senior management and the how the people on the ground, how they kind of have those end conversations with customers, whether it's to make a sale or
Mm-hmm.
it's, let's say, manage a precarious situation, it's kind of not very smooth. So
Mm-hmm.
I was always kind of conducting some sort of a coaching style intervention, or kind of setting up some sort of playbook,
Mm.
all of these engagements. And so this was back in 2018, 19, and I kind of started thinking about, hey, where else could this apply, right? So that was the genesis of what ultimately became Aspiro. But if I were to segue this down into, why we chose to kind of work on this, me and my co-founder, we are both typical Indian middle class kids. And I have an elder sister who's kind of like, she was an all-star in her school and college days. She was at everything, dancing, debates and all that. And I was like that shy nerd kid who used to watch cartoons on Cartoon Network. Um, so I was like, I had a lot of, amazing ideas and all, but I was always tinkering on my own with some game set or some video game. but
Mm.
was never really confident in my own abilities to articulate, right? And later
Mm.
on, even when I went to college, I went to some amazing places. I went to IIT and post that, even went to Ivy League, I went to Yale University to their healthcare program. It took me quite some time to overcome, my own inhibitions. Maybe confidence was not the issue, but articulation was still a recurring theme, right? So with
Mm.
Aspiro, that is what my CTO also has a very similar background. And our broader vision is to kind of make humans more articulate in professional
Mm.
settings. And sales is just a great starting ground for that because the conversations are, even more higher stake.
Yeah, no, makes sense. I think the kind of problems most of the startups are started because again, people see the problem, they feel they
Yeah.
find the solution, but maybe the exact right solution doesn't exist for that industry, for that use case. So
Yes.
you see a gap and you think like, hey, this product can solve this. So I do understand that how can Aspiro help make humans more articulate in your professional comms, right? Especially with respect to sales, right? But like you like as you said, like walk us through like what is the pain point currently is when it comes to sales context, right? Like why B2B SaaS companies when sales from these B2B SaaS companies are trying to get on calls. So what is the problem? Is it the problem with the onboarding? Is it the problem with the ramp up time? Is it that they're not trained well, or there's not a lot of practice that happen before they actually get on the field and start making real calls, right? So walk us through some of the pain points that you've seen with respect to sales in B2B SaaS.
Sure. So if you really look at how sales has evolved, especially in B2B settings, the way sales has evolved is also very closely correlated with how software has evolved, like in the past 20, 30 odd years, if you especially look at that, right? So prior to that, let's say till early 2000s, the typical description of a seller would be something that you see in movies, right? Wolf of Wall Street, and somebody who's a stock trader and all. So somebody who's like very pushy, and they are just good at convincing you. Basically high on EQ and stuff like that. But in the past, 2 or 3 decades, what has happened is that sales has also got a lot more tactical, right? That quintessential description of sales has not really been the case, for quite some time. And that is also the phase when SaaS kind of, started evolving with the advent of Salesforce and all, like literally out cloud. So the in the first phase, I would say for the first 10, 15 years in this century, 2000, early 2000s to let's say 2012, 2013, typically what we were seeing was people were trying to scale up what sales used to be prior to 2000s, right? So if
Mm.
you had a lot of training collateral, how is it that you can use software to send the same collateral to hundreds or thousands of people, sellers on the street, and
Mm-hmm.
how can they consume that better, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had that first version of sales enablement platforms coming in. After that, in the the next decade, which is still about like a couple of years back, 2012 to 2022, we saw products coming in which took it to the next level, wherein you could actually listen into calls, call analytics. You didn't really have to, let's say, handhold every person at any
Mm.
level. I would say handholding still used to happen in a manual fashion, but at least tracking people's performance got automated, right? So we saw a lot
Mm.
of those products coming in, in the past decade. But what has happened is with generative AI coming into the fray, now people want even that hand holding or execution or
Mm.
outcome, very common buzzword, in the SaaS circles nowadays. People want outcomes also to be handled by software, right? So what that means is how are people actually selling can
Mm.
also be conducted, in a large way by software, right? So human
Right.
only has to be kind of like, at the orchestration layer. If you think of it
Mm-hmm.
like opera, the performers are all kind of like mini software or AI modules, but the human,
Mm.
like, kind of the conductor there. So with that lens, what are the pain points that we are looking at, right? I mean, when it comes to
Mm.
Aspiro, we repeatedly see that founders and early stage sellers, if you think of, selling from the point of view of evolution of a company, right? Early
Mm.
on, I myself at that stage, for instance, you are kind of trying to understand how to position your product the best way. You're
Right.
writing on the pitch a lot, right? And
Mm.
once you iterate on the pitch, hopefully you start seeing early signs of PMF. You reach maybe, let's say, $1 or $2 million and all. And then you start thinking in terms of scaling up that revenue and all those, efforts, right? Disseminating what you know, what is there with you, or maybe let's say, a couple of early team members becomes progressively very, very difficult. Why? Because products are getting more and more technical in nature as we go along, right? For something like a staple CRM product, maybe that is not the issue. Maybe you still have to think in terms of very high level parameters, like one, how your CRM would vary from another CRM. But
Mm.
you have to sell an ML ops platform. You yourself worked at GTM Buddy, right? So for that sort of a
Mm.
product, the question is not just what the user does on a day-by-day basis, but it's also a lot more technical in nature, right?
Right.
So then how do you scale up that understanding, from those two, three founders all the way up to, let's say, a team of even 20, 30, if not 200? So
Mm.
that, product level understanding and articulation is, a tough thing to scale.
Right.
And as I just described, the evolution of SaaS in general, uh, we are seeing our mailboxes or LinkedIn, being spammed all the time with automated outreach.
Mm.
So people are trying to find hacks to ensure, stronger human connect in their selling outreach. We
Right.
saw, let's say, video-based outreach and all that. Now, cold calling is much more effective than ever,
Mm.
as opposed to, let's say, emails. Just the lag or the timeline, the sort of timeline you have to go through to kind of reach out to somebody on an email and to persuade them uh,
Right.
to come on a call, let alone, let's say, think of a purchase. That timeline is, it's much more complicated, and the entire process is much more complicated. Emailing providers like, Gmail and, Microsoft Outlook and all that, they've put very strong constraints. And
Mm.
lastly, there's too many tools in sales, as you would
Right.
also. So what happened is that the way knowledge and sales is approached is tool driven rather than the other way around. Tools should be aligning with how we do things.
Mm.
And that hasn't happened for a long time, right? Some
Right.
people think of this as a product bloat problem as well. But with
Yeah.
AI, you can actually align more with human reality. So, so
Mm.
what we're trying to do with Aspiro is how can you kind of just focus on, hey, this is what sticks with, when we engage with our customers, and how can you
Mm-hmm.
ensure that, let's say if you have to do a lot more technical sales, your young sellers, they are able to kind of, pick on the right cues much quicker. If your A's have to close deals with, let's say, CTOs or VPs of engineering, for that sort
Right.
of a, how do they do a good job at building that technical trust, and so on
Mm.
and so. So that's the core of the problem statement we are trying to hit.
Right. No, I think that's a very well defined problem statement, and that you are tackling, right. And you
Hmm.
rightly mentioned about the tool overload or even extension overload, right? Like you open your Gmail inbox and you type a mail, and there's like at least 10 things that are popping up to like, hey, we'll help you write your email better, and here's a template, and and so on. Like everybody's trying to impact on that one small real estate, right?
Yeah,
So, but that is still like that is still comes later. But even when like some like people join in the company, right? And you again rightly mentioned like not everybody is also hitting quota, right? Like only 10-20% of your sales would hit quota, and those are the initial people. Like maybe at the start it's your founders who are doing sales, and you hire a few set of people initially, and as years go by and as your company scale, those are the people who join early, and unless they have like a very specific niche experience in that industry
yeah,
or with that product, so they will always become the top quota attainers, right? So and and this has always been challenge for CROs and VP of sales, where like if you plot quota attainment of your people, it's a bell curve with
it's well
majority people in the middle, right? your on the left hand side you have your low achievers, and the middle you have like your average salespeople, and on the right side like 10-20% of people who are achieving quota or even exceeding quota. So and the always the problem is like how do you move the middle, right? How do you move the middle to the right so that more and more people can go and achieve that sales quota, right? So is practice like going to help you like when you start newly, how can you quickly ramp up, right?
Mm.
Like what is your like ramp up time for these kind of people, right? And should you
Mm.
create specific trainings for a specific type of people, right? Some people are extroverts, some I've also seen like a few salespeople being introverts. So I don't know, like, people, as you said, right, like the technology is not following the process, like, it's kind of reverse, right? So it should be like technology should help these kind of specific nuances, I feel, right? And
Right.
so what do you feel in this way where like in terms of metrics, right? Like what sort of metrics that you would see, like moving the middle is one, right? You want quota attainment, obviously, is like a huge pain for CROs and sales leaders. So apart
Yeah.
from that, like, and we also spoke about ramp up time, but in response, like with addition to like ramp up time, quota attainment, what are some of the industry metrics that you feel a solution like this generally would solve, like if a company is using this kind of a
Yeah.
product?
Yeah. No, that's a great question, and a question that I also get a lot from our own buyers and prospects. So with the problem statement of human improvement, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we have
Hmm.
to understand that we are making a human get better at something that's a bit more nuanced, at, let's say,
Right.
something simple as writing, right?
Mm.
Even writing is fairly nuanced. I don't know. But
Hmm.
specifically with regards to sales, there's one way to look at it, which is purely through metrics.
Right.
Uh, and the other way is to kind of think of this as something that's more of a hygiene level improvement. You
Mm.
do something which kind of solves for the greater good, so to speak,
Mm.
right? So for example, if you're an athlete, you will run with the right posture. That's one way to look at it. It may not
Right.
help you in the shorter term, but over the longer term, it will keep you away from injuries and stuff like that. So when you look
Mm.
at the metric side of it, uh, typically if you have a product which is let's say somewhere around 15 to $20,000 annual contract value, right?
Hmm.
Some contexts, this number could be lower or higher, but typically to ramp up or get a sales rep call ready, it will take you
Mm.
around 4 to 6 months, right?
Mm.
Uh, this is assuming that the sales rep will stick with you. In
Mm.
many cases, what is already happening is the rep understands that they will never be able to hit quota, or they will at least not soonish. So they're already kind of on their way out.
Mm.
And the irony is, you talked about the bell curve. Star performers are actually even more sought after in the market, right?
Mm.
So they're always, kind of looking to make a move unless they get that confidence from, the VP of sales or the founders. So that period of 4 to 6 months is largely, all about getting people up to speed on the product side as soon as possible.
Mm.
In most cases, when you interview sellers and you hire them, of course, you look at their basic conversational ability and
Mm.
basic level of professionalism. In many cases, companies have a filter for lateral hiring, so you will probably not just hire a fresher, or you don't want 100% raw people, but you get somebody who's kind of going to be able to have a quick head start. um, that period of 4 to 6 months is full of a lot of inefficiencies, because you waste away a lot of call leads. You make people shadow yourself if you're the head of sales or you're the founder, and
Mm.
a lot of that learning is just happening purely by the seller's self motivation, and the founder or the sales leader doing a good job at giving a glimpse to the seller that this is how we sell, this is what
Right.
works for us till now, right? So if you look at some of the best, sales teams, especially in SaaS, even when they had single digit number of employees, they
Mm.
had a playbook or RevOps type of mentality, right? Wherein they started thinking in terms of, uh, modules, or, having a very set playbook, even
Hmm.
for their first sales hire, right? You do those kind of things, you can cut this ramp up time from 4 to 6 months almost to like 2, 3 months, even potentially shorter, because you're thinking, you're basically making the sales guy able to speak what they actually have to do at the end of the day, right? Even if it's a networking event or let's say a sales event, at the end of the day, how they talk about the value props of what your product is, that's what, what is a make or break. So
Right.
that should be the starting point, as opposed to, let's say, saying, hey, this is our team and this is what we do and all. It kind of takes a back seat. So that is one. The second thing, as I already mentioned, emailing uh, is full of spam right now, especially on the sales side. If you look at what Google and Microsoft, the kind of policies that they've come up, they're especially to kind of curb down AI emailing, right? So earlier, the kind of conversion figures we used to see was around 2 to 4%. Right now, it's 0.2 to 0.5%. And people are getting blacklisted domains, pretty frequently now. So cold calling is back, and how, right? So that is why we see a lot of the people building parallel dialers, and which essentially means that you don't have to waste time, dialing numbers and all. A
Right.
system will do it for you. Um, People are also thinking in terms of, let's say, prioritization scores. So these are the leads I should call first, as opposed to these ones, because the buying intent or signals are stronger, right? And a lot of those leads just purely get wasted, right? So you can avoid wasting almost 50% of the leads earlier on, wherein, let's say, in the first 6 to 9 odd months, if you had a fresher trying to make those calls, you would literally see no conversion, right? You would need somebody who's pretty solid or experienced in your team to do that, right? So, but with the product like Aspiro, that effort completely gets taken away. They can actually practice for the most complicated scenarios on the product. And there's a hidden metric out here. If you ask a seller, how do they plan out their week? They'll say that they spend most of their time researching. Many reps do that on Sundays, right? Some reps do that on Sundays, Mondays, and all, and then they kind of, follow that up with their sales cadence. And, there's no official data I have on this, but the conversations that we did, we tracked this, as a number, and this number is somewhere between 20 to 30%. So people are spending 1 out of 5 working days just doing research and planning their script, right? Okay, this is how I'll speak to this guy, especially if you have to speak to a director, VP, CXO type buyer persona, right? So, so that time, can we just make it that simple for them to, just know that, hey, I'm going to be on these 15, 20 odd calls this week, and this is going to be my exact articulation strategy for each of those calls, right? So that's the meter-sized way. But at a very high level, the problem is much deeper than that, right? If you don't have a playbook-oriented or, let's say, conversation-centric approach, pretty much, pretty much the entire lay of the land is in the rep's hands, right? So what I mean by that is, about 5 years back, people were not able to record their team's calls. In 2024, people are saying, hey, I can't listen in or read summaries for every call.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's still going to boil down to how can we solve for the flaws in those calls, right?
Right.
What we are saying is, hey, you probably don't even have to look at, thousands of calls to know the 5 biggest flaws that our team kind of goes through, because, share that in one-on-ones, weekly one-on-ones, or, with their managers, their peers. We can actually, nip it in the bud and give them exact tactical, role plays wherein they can practice for those scenarios and say that, for example, there's this guy, Kyle SI, right? He has his own website, salesintroverts.com, which is what you were saying. If you are hiring sellers with a technical background or ex-engineers who are now sellers, you can have a certain type of playbook in your team,
Right.
right? You probably you will kind of try to work on their warmth, or how is it that they should build that technical trust early on. So that's one style of. So you can pretty much create that playbook on Aspiro and make your team practice that. Yeah. So
Nice.
there's a broader approach. You correctly describe that. It's playbooks that are exercisable and iterative for your team.
Hmm.
And if you don't have a playbook, then you can pick from any of the templates that we may have. You can say that, hey, I want to do something like challenger sales or Basho
Hmm.
sales and all that, and we'll provide
Yeah.
that as a preset template. You can build on top of that. That's
Nice.
usually for early stage teams. Yeah.
Nice. But I think you shared again like a very interesting point as well. Like earlier, few years back, people are not recording those calls, and now it's like there are too many calls recorded, and which one should I listen to, right?
Yes.
And uh, it's also that angle where you don't have to listen to all the calls,
Yeah.
entirety of the call. You just have to listen to where you went wrong. And
Hmm.
if you can summarize, the current summaries in Gong and Chorus, Navoma, and all these tools exist. Like, hey, this is what happened. This is the next steps, and
Yeah.
everything. But from a coaching side, right? Like, what you could have done that's different, that's better, and that would have yielded a different like angle altogether, right?
Yeah.
Because and obviously you cannot fix it like on the live call. I mean, there are tools that does that, but I don't think that's like a whole different conversation. But very right, bang on that. You should just the rep should just know, like, hey, this is where you went wrong, and that's great for managers, right? And
Mhm.
for specific playbooks, like, hey, you're talking to an enterprise rep and sorry, enterprise account, um, you know, based in Germany with this XYZ industry, and these are the examples that you should have shared, or these are the specific points that you should have mentioned, right? Those are the very specific learnings that the rep would actually benefit from, right? Which will help them again get more conversions, more opportunities down the funnel, and
Hmm.
overall like close more revenue, right? So I think that's bang on. So since you mentioned like you have a lot of customers that are working with you with different set of challenges, right? So can you share a few examples on like what sort of problems that these customers generally come up with, and like how Aspiro generally solves these challenges for them?
Yeah. As I was saying, you really have to think of this from the point of view of the evolution of a company, right? Or their sales
Hmm.
vertical. So we have actually customers fitting all the buckets. So for very early stage startups,
Mm-hmm.
what is happening is that the founders are sales mavericks, or one of the founders is, and
Hmm.
they don't believe in the seller's ability or new hires ability to close deals. So they are
Hmm.
still not, it's not easy for them to give away the sales process or a key part of the pipeline to a new hire, right?
Right.
And
Hmm.
typically what you will see is whenever you see that founder on the call, that deal is going to get converted. Otherwise, it will not be converted, which is not a very good scenario, right? You can't scale
Right.
those setups. So there, literally the problem statement is, how do you think in terms of playbooks? What did you
Hmm.
do on this call? Start breaking it down in the form of steps. If it's a cold call, this is how I started off the call. Sure, you can have a number of best practices or templates. So many sales coaches have their own call starters and all that. But what works for
Hmm.
you from this industry perspective? How do you combine the two, right? So
Hmm.
thinking in terms of playbooks and then putting it on the product for very early
Got it.
stage setups. Indian SaaS especially struggles with this, by the way, right? Because
Hmm.
we don't, as a culture, we don't really, think in terms of playbooks. We think of everything in terms of an HR problem, right? So we'll probably say, hey, guy X, why don't you train guy
Hmm.
B, right? But it's better if it's in a documented form, right? So how do you essentially convert that Notion doc or that whimsical doc, actually in terms of an Aspiro track or Aspiro, role play doc, right, which is
Hmm.
practice. The second customer is actually, it's a deep tech kind of a product,
Hmm.
fairly technical. Even for an average engineer, it's not going to be super easy to understand what they are doing. So what they really need help with is they have a good bunch of BDRs, but they feel, as I mentioned, they feel that their sellers will be able to do a better job if they are able to build better technical trust, because their
Hmm.
buyers are also, let's say, VPs of engineering and cyber sec experts and all that. So specifically, how do you present a very technical sort of value prop much better
Mm.
to different types of personas, right?
Right.
And then the third customer is kind of struggling with something that we are also kind of learning quite a bit more about. They have a kick-ass playbook. They have also scaled up their sales team. Founders are pretty experienced. It's their second or third SaaS startup,
Mm-hmm.
and their head of sales is also pretty, pretty neat, organized guy. So they do have
Mm.
a pretty meaty playbook. It's just that they have made hires all over the world, but so there's a lot of adoption noise. So people are either using the same playbook in a very different way, or some early hires are using it, very aggressively for the first 2, 3 months, but later on nobody really even looks at it. So how
Mm.
can they keep it more relevant? Because their product is also evolving, it's getting updated, markets are shifting, they are also increasing their ticket size or aiming to do that. So that automatically means you have to probably do more of solution selling. They have two,
Mm.
three suites. You have to combine different components of their entire product offering. So their having a kick-ass playbook will also probably have its limitations. So how do you kind of
Right.
convert to conversation? So three very interesting scenarios. We're already seeing,
Mm.
and we are pretty confident that the problem statement is very real. Where, as you were saying, where we do see a lot of exciting stuff happening in the future is we probably will be working directly with coaches as well, because
Mm.
people already want somebody to kind of help them in terms of laying out the playbook and all, and then an end-to-end offering. In our case, we are also understanding that we can increase the value created for our customers if we solve for a lot of the serviceable components. Not everything can
Right.
be by tech,
Mm.
beyond a certain point. So we are exploring that, working with agencies, working with coaching services or coaching influencers, and
Mm.
how do we kind of integrate the two? Aspiro's roleplay platform, and what happens on the enablement, playbook creation side, coaching side, and so on. Yeah.
Got it. Nice, nice. I think these are really good insights and good examples, I would say. And I think one thing about adoption is like doesn't matter how many like processes, playbooks, tools, or anything you create, adoption will like always be a challenge. I don't think that
Much
will be
different.
solved. Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, like it's like it takes a whole different angle to solve this adoption challenge, right? Whether you're adopting to a tech, adopting to a process, to a playbook, or to a system, or like to probably anything. So but yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Completely agreed.
that's like a different challenge altogether.
Yes.
But yeah, coming to the again, thanks for sharing these great insights, Puneet. Like coming to the like a new section of the episode, which is called the lightning round. So I
Oh,
know I've been asking to a lot of questions to you already, but we'll ask you three more, and before we end this episode, and you'll have to answer with whatever is on top of your mind immediately. So with that, like the first one, right? So, what is the one thing that has helped you shorten your learning curve?
having the right set of people around me.
Nice, nice. That's interesting. Like the second one, what do you know about your work now that you wish you would have known when you first started?
You don't have to be too organized to do some stuff, especially something like sales.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's better to just send that text out, or I reached out to you, right? I mean, I dropped a text to you, right? Without
Yeah,
overthinking much. I saw a post and I did that. So that
yeah,
you should do a lot more of that as a founder, as
right.
opposed to thinking about being very prim and proper. Everything has to be sorted presentation wise and all. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, just send that X away, where X is that message, that outreach, that ping, and whatnot.
Mhm.
I think.
Yeah. Take risks, just execute.
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah,
right.
absolutely.
And the third and the last one. So, what did your biggest professional failure teach you?
Uh, so I would say that's surely my previous startup, which did not work.
Mhm.
Um, I was in a pretty bad state for the next 6 to 9 odd months. And my response to that was I read somewhere around 80, 83 books. non-stop. So I actually grew a thick beard, much thicker than yours, only reading and nothing else, eating and reading, and not even watching any shows or anything. But in hindsight, I think what that taught me was that in our give or take 80, 90 year old life, if you do a startup or if you do anything worth doing, which takes, let's say, a few years, it's still a blip, right? So it's kind of like a match in a 5 match series or something like that. So the thing that works for the most productive or the most the biggest achievers out there is that they are able to quickly move on and understand that they will have a lot more shots, so to speak. And in hindsight, I would not be super fixated on that. I mean, with Aspiro, to be very honest, I just have that mental fortitude. And I mentioned to you that it's important to have the right set of people around you. So everything kind of plays into that, right? So I think my lessons, if I have to keep it succinct, don't overthink. You should design your life in a way that you get multiple shots, to make a better life. It's not really just about one startup idea. And yeah, always, take your moment and chill for a while. Have your weekends to yourself. Watch your IPL or whatever sport you follow. That's super critical, super important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or attend SaaS Bhumi and meet us.
Or attend SaaS movie and meet people who do podcasts and jump on a
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. But again, thanks, Puneet. I think these are very interesting insights on in general as well, and also about how sales managers should focus on coaching aspects, right, for their reps, and how should they personalize the coaching, and for maybe the playbook or the that respective call, right, or that account, right, like how do you create specific playbooks, right? So I think this was really interesting. So thanks a lot for coming on the show and sharing all these
Amen,
insights.
man. I just love the conversation, and super excited to see what you're up to next. Super excited to see the podcast journey, and looking forward to the episodes that are coming up.